All right, guys, week 7 is here and we are in it for the long haul. That's why I'm wearing my mesh trucker cap. So got a ton of great games to preview for week 7. So as always, hit that like button, subscribe, and I'll cue the intro and see you on the other side. Welcome back into Twin Takes Fantasy Football, and boy, do we have a lot to talk about today with the Week 7 slate of NFL games. Last year, we had something close to Bye-Mageddon, and just with the way that teams have shaped out, this week we have the Bills, the Eagles, and the Vikings, just to name a couple teams that are on bye. So we got to go deep diving for some of those fantasy points, especially in a year in which through the first 6 weeks, we've had exactly 100 less touchdowns than the first 6 weeks of 2021. So this is a year in which fantasy scoring has decreased. We are looking and scraping the bottom of the barrel for fantasy points, and we got to really dive deep for some of these points to even scrounge up something close to a win. So without further ado, let's get into our first matchup that I am looking forward to, and that's going to be Sunday at noon. Falcons at Bengals. The current line sits at -6 with the Bengals with a projected over-under of 47.5 points. That leaves Atlanta with projected 20.5 points and Cincinnati's projected with 26.5 points. So why is this game so intriguing? Let me tell you. Cincinnati has completely changed their fortune since and has gone 3-1 since starting out with the abysmal 0-2. And Joe Burrow is coming off the best passing performance of the year, which demonstrates the remarkable ability Zac Taylor has to completely adjust the strategy with which they approach the offense. So we saw Zac Taylor just getting absolutely mauled by pressure through the first couple of games, couldn't get anything off. His time to release was abysmal. He had one of the highest sack rates in the league, and obviously we have that image still seared into our heads of Joe Burrow looking over the sideline and yelling, "No empty set, no empty set." So obviously Zac Taylor, being above average coach, went ahead and adjusted the play scheme. So now, as we look over the past 6 games, we have seen Joe Burrow go from, in week 1, under 25, he had 25 and over snaps under center. And now, in this past game, he had only 2 snaps under center, which has greatly reduced the amount of pressures that Joe Burrow has faced and has allowed him to be a much more efficient passer when it comes to finding T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, and Ja'Marr Chase. This change in tactics and their ability to adapt and find a passing strategy that works for Joe Burrow, as well as a bottom 5 pass defense in the Falcons, should be a ton of fantasy points resulting for the Bengals offense, especially with that Burrow to Chase or Burrow to Higgins stack, which I know a lot of people are really rocking this year in fantasy. On the other side, it's just a really scrappy Falcons team that continues to outperform expectations. I mean, they were in so many games, and this 3-3 record isn't actually quite a true reflection of what they've done so far. There is a very possible reality in which they are 4-2 or even 5-1, given some iffy ref calls going one way or the other. Mariota is playing well. Oh, you get to see the dog. Mariota is playing well, and Drake London has adapted to the NFL quicker than any rookie we have seen in the NFL previously. His snap share is larger than any rookie NFL wide receiver in the history of the NFL, so his adjustment to the NFL is going quite well, and obviously he's doing great things for fantasy despite a couple slow weeks. So with that being said, let's get into our must-starts for this game. We have Joe Burrow, Ja'Marr Chase, Joe Mixon, and T. Higgins from the Bengals side. And then from the Falcons side, Kyle Pitts found the end zone for the first time last week, and I think we just ride that hot streak. Again, this is a secondary that is not great, but it's also not bad either. But there's definitely ways in which I think Marcus Mariota and that offense will find ways to put up points. I think Kyle Pitts, now that he has his first taste of the end zone, it's going to be much more frequent, so he's a start there. Marcus Mariota is going to be a must-start just based on his rushing ability, and Drake London based on how I said he quickly adapted to the NFL. In the probably starting tier, you have Tyler Algier and you have Tyler Boyd. Again, this is a really terrible Falcons defense, and if you need to take a desperation shot in a flex or a double flex, Tyler Boyd should definitely see his fair share of targets from Joe Burrow. And I mean, Tyler Algier, clearly, as long as Cordero Patterson is on IR, he will be the starting running back, and a desperation shot at most, or not a desperation shot, but if you are looking for options, especially in this running back room that's been war-torn by injuries. We look at Dobbins now having 8 knee injuries and stuff like that. Tyler Algier certainly makes a decent start candidate. And then in the desperation spot, we only have one. That's going to be Hayden Hurst. We've seen him have a pretty good connection with Joe Burrow, and just given the way tight ends are, I don't think it's a terrible flex or a terrible stream at the tight end spot. Moving on to game number 2, which is going to be Lions at the Cowboys. Currently, this line is projected at Dallas -7, and the over-under is set at 48. This leaves us with a total projected points for each team. Detroit has a projected point total of 21 points, while Dallas is projected to have 27 points. Again, based on just the way the NFL scoring has gone this past year, fairly high. So, listen, Lions had a monster start to the season and had the highest points scored through Week 5 before goosing against the New England defense. And let's not forget, this is Bill Belichick. He's a defensive mastermind. He came in and really took away their very few options. We have to remember that they still had Amon-Ra injured. Amon-Ra was coming back from injury. Swift was still injured. Chark was still out of the game. So they really didn't have that much to work with. And I want to go back and remind you of a topic that we discussed a couple weeks ago. There's a great article written by Eric Eager of the Shrine Bowl in college football saying how the way people design offenses and coaches design offenses in the NFL has completely shifted in most recent years. Instead of being completely dominant and reliant on the quarterback running the offense, it's now become more a summation of all the parts. That's why we see these quarterbacks really emerge, because when you surround them with pieces like a Jamar Chase, like an Amon-Ra St. Brown, like a DeAndre Swift, when you have all these offensive weapons that you can utilize, then you can go in and scheme better pass plays and better protections and more options for the quarterback to take care of. Obviously, I'm not explaining it as good as Eric Eager does, but it's a really, really fascinating read. And I mean, just on a tangent here, this is why we went out and saw the Dolphins trade for Tyreek to help Tua. This is why we saw the Eagles trade for A.J. Brown. This is why we saw the Raiders trade for Davante Adams, because the more NFL teams are approaching this theory of it's not the best quarterback always wins, it's the best amalgamation of offensive pieces wins. So again, that despite Jared Goff being a very average quarterback, surrounding him with Amon-Ra, with DeAndre Swift, with DJ Chark, with Jamal Williams, all these pieces should definitely help reinvigorate that offense. Again, a lot of those pieces were injured. We saw how well they were performing when they were at full strength. They now had a bye week to get ready and get healthy and rest up. DeAndre Swift is supposed to be back. I expect them to look more like the Lions that we saw in the first couple weeks rather than the Lions we saw against the New England Patriots. So that's what I'm expecting. I'm not expecting that horrific nightmare of football that we saw play out against the Patriots. So all those Lions pieces are still very much in play for myself. On the other side of the ball, this is one of the worst defenses in the league when it comes to the Lions. So Dak should be back under center, adding another fantastic dimension to the Cowboys offense that has had pieces like CeeDee Lamb performing really well, Zeke performing really well, and Tony Pollard even has taken that next step. I expect them to come out and put on a show after last week's loss to the Eagles and obviously being reinvigorated with Dak back under center. So let's go into our must-starts. Obviously, Amon-Ra, Swift, CeeDee, Dak, Zeke, Pollard. Those are the 6 guys out of this game that I think are must-starts that are basically locked into your lineup. When it comes to the probably starts, you're looking at Jared Goff because, again, dominant offense, high-scoring offense, not dictated by the quarterback, dictated by the pieces. Jared Goff is just another cog in that machine, but he should produce well despite even going against this number 1 defense in the Cowboys, or at least my opinion it's the number 1 defense in the league. TJ Hawkinson and Michael Gallup also come out to probably starts for me as well, just based on matchup for Gallup and utilization for Hawkinson respectively. And then in the desperation start, just given that I do expect this game to be a fairly high-scoring game, there are some pieces that you can go for if you do need desperation starts. Jamal Williams is a backup to Swift. Again, he's not going to be fully healthy. He'll probably still be on a snap count. Jamal Williams will still probably be getting the goal line work. DJ Chark as a complement to Amon-Ra St. Brown, and obviously Noah Brown and his emergence in the Cowboys offense with Cooper Rush. I think he could be a really sneaky play. He's played really, really well for the Cowboys. So let's move on to our third game that I really want to highlight, and that's going to be Chiefs at the 49ers. Currently, this sits at an over-under of 48.5 points, with KC favored by 3 points. This leads us to a projected point total for Kansas City of 26, and San Francisco is currently projected for 23 total points. Again, a fairly nice over-under, considering how some over-unders this week are below 40 points. So this is a game that should be very exciting, mostly just stemming from the fact that it is a rematch of the Super Bowl from a few years ago. And I'm sure there's no bad blood between the teams, right? There's no love lost, despite that incredible game that Jimmy Garoppolo threw away in the fourth quarter with an overthrown pass. Yeah, definitely no love lost there. And Jimmy's back under center to really reheat that rivalry. If you look at the defense for the Chiefs and you adjust for position rank, Chiefs are top 5s in yards allowed to wide receivers. So expect a high scoring game. Again, just from the standpoint of Chiefs dynamic offense, they have so many offensive pieces. They're going to put up points on the San Francisco 49ers. And because they are a very average to below average defense, they're going to allow points. So again, it's going to be that juicy fantasy combo of a high dynamic, high scoring team with a suboptimal defense that's going to allow for point scoring on both sides, as both teams will need to keep up, and it's going to become a shootout rather than a defensive struggle. On the other side of the ball, Jimmy G has settled into the offense after taking over for Lance in week 3. Brandon Ayuk did show off his skills last week and showed you what he can do as a number 1 target in this offense when he's not in Kyle Shanahan's doghouse. Again, we do want to address Jeff Wilson just because we saw how bad that turned out for him in a really positive matchup against the Falcons last week, and I think my confidence in Jeff Wilson is shaken again for this week. Again, we talked about Kansas City's going to put up points, and 49ers and Jimmy Garoppolo is going to have to put up points to compete with them. It's going to put them in a very a positive pass script for the game, and we know that Kyle Shanahan, when he has to go to those passing sets, Kyle Juszczyk becomes the main running back. He leans away from Jeff Wilson Jr. when it's not a positive run game script. So I think this is again a good matchup for the wide receivers and Debo and Ayuk and obviously Kittle as well. I am still very trepidatious just because of the way I project the game script to play out for Jeff Wilson. So I wouldn't be playing him if I have better options. So again, let's go into our must-starts here. I just mentioned Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. Yes, Brandon Ayuk is a must-start just given the passing defense that he's presented here in Kansas City and the confidence I have after last week. George Kittle and Travis Kelce are both must-starts at the tight end position. I think this is the first time we've put both tight ends in the must-start category. Patrick Mahomes, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Yes, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, after his back-to-back down performance, is still a must-start. He's still one of the focal points of this offense, and I think the touchdown upside and the passing upside from Patrick Mahomes means he's a must-start. In the probably start category, you're going at Jimmy G. This is where I will put Jeff Wilson Jr. He still is the starting running back for the San Francisco 49ers. The Kansas City defense doesn't scare really anyone. You can put up points on them, so he will get involved. Again, I just don't think if it gets out of hand pretty early in Kansas City's favor, they're going to go to Kyle Juszczyk instead of Jeff Wilson. Obviously, MVS, after goosing last week, he finds himself in the probably start category. The desperation start here is going to be Mecole Hardman. We saw him get significant utilization last week, so if you really are struggling and don't have any options to go forth, and especially in deeper leagues, Mecole Hardman, I think, would be a guy that you can resort to in a flex desperation scenario. So those are 3 games that I really, really wanted to highlight, and let's get into the quick hits / best of the rest. And we'll start off with Saints at Cardinals, which is going to be tonight, the Thursday night game. And this is just a game just marred by injuries. We're looking at Jameis Winston, Jarvis Landry, Michael Thomas, Adam Troutman, Marquise Hollywood Brown. I mean, just so many injuries to go around that this game could have been so exciting, and now it's kind of a letdown for me. We shall see if there's another Taysom Hill controversy gets stirred up if he gets to start at QB. Again, apparently there's some issues floating around with Andy Dalton. I don't know if it's a shoulder or something else, but there's a potential for him to not play. He's been limited in practice. So again, Taysom Hill could start at quarterback and still be labeled as a tight end in most platforms, which is going to lead to another whole controversy surrounding Taysom Hill. In my personal opinion, as a commissioner, take a laissez-faire approach. Play the game within the bounds the platform allows you. If the platform has him a tight end, then you're allowed to play him as a tight end. That's it. No special rules, no special accommodations. Just whatever the league is currently allowing, or whatever the platform is allowing, they're allowed to do that. I'm very excited for Olave to be back, especially without Thomas and Landry. I'm very, very excited. He's an amazing rookie. I was so disappointed by that concussion a couple weeks ago, but I'm very, very happy to see him back. And this is also going to be crucial for Kamara to step up. We had a good game last week, which is his first good game of the season. I want to see him put back-to-back good games together to make sure he justifies that first-round draft capital. Also, this is going to be very, very important to see how Hopkins looks in this Cardinals offense and see if he really was that missing piece that causes this Cardinals offense to really click, because they have been absolutely abysmal through the first 6 weeks. Moving on, Packers at Commanders. Am I just a glutton for punishment if I continue to start the Packers running backs? Because, like, okay, Commanders, still a bad running defense, still don't have Chase Young back, still have a pretty beat-up defensive line, and with Randall Cobb out and with a thumb injury to Aaron Rodgers, they have to run the ball, right? They have to run the ball. They have to. And A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones are still insanely talented, right? Right? Like, I'm not crazy. We saw how talented they were last year. I think I am glutton for punishment. I'm just going to start them again. You got it. You got to start both of them again. Even after I said last week was the end-all be-all week where I give up on them, I find myself right back in the fold, not giving up on them, and I feel extremely gross about it. So on the other side, obviously there's a lot of questions with Carson Wentz being out. Now you have Taylor Heineke. What goes on with the wide receivers? Who are you starting? Jahan Dotson's still going to be out, so I think McLaurin is probably a safe start from that standpoint. But I will say this is definitely a game in which the Packers running back, their run defense is ranked 30th currently. They are a sieve at running back, and I don't know who really you should start here. Antonio Gibson obviously is on his way out. Brian Robinson is coming in as a goal line back. If I had to start one running back here for the Packers, for the Commanders, it would be Brian Robinson, but I'm looking for options anywhere else because there's so many questions surrounding this team, from the utilization of the running back room to how Taylor Heineke is going to play under center, plus the injuries at the wide receiver position. So moving on, that's just so many questions with the Packers Commanders. Moving on, Bucks Panthers. You got to play CMC regardless of matchup. No other Panther. Don't mess with it. Don't play with it. DJ Moore on the bench. Don't deal with it. But CMC is good regardless of any matchup. Fournette and Evans should have a good game, and you have to start them. Don't get cute with it, but this will be really good to see how Todd Bowles adjusts the offensive line, especially all the injuries they've incurred against a pretty bad defense. Moving on, Jags. Saquon is dominant. He's projecting my over one fantasy asset on the week. I mean, he is just beyond a smash play against this Jags defense, and I'm going to go with Wandale being a sleeper pick here. Again, Tony's still out, Galladay's still out, Sterling Shepard's out for the year. It's a really good matchup. Jags defense has not been that great, and Wandale, he was slated as a starter going into preseason and week 1 before he got injured. I think that he could have a really dominant role going into this season. I think he is a stash on your bench, or if you need a really, really deep sleeper pick in a really deep league, Wandale is a guy that I would be comfortable starting. Jags, Kirk, Etienne, Robinson. I'm glad for punishment. Continue to start Robinson, and then obviously Trevor Lawrence, despite the Giants actually being quite good this year. Browns, Ravens. This is going to be a really key game to pay attention to the injury report for. Dobbins sat out with knee tightness in the last game versus Giants, and as of today was a DNP at practice. So Browns are giving up the second most points to the running back position. So if Dobbins is out, Kenyon Drake is a full go. Even if Dobbins gets limited work, I don't know how he's going to react for the game. So Kenyon Drake is probably in my lineups at this point. Amari Cooper, actually, for the first time, is a confidence play for me for the Browns. This Ravens secondary has been underperforming the entire year. So look for them to actually branch out. Jacoby Brissett has been performing better than we've expected him to. Amari Cooper, I think, will actually find the end zone this game and be a good start. So he's my confidence play there. Texans at Raiders. It's Dameon Pierce season, baby. He's the one. He's the heart and soul of this team. He is in every single game. His bye week is behind you. Full steam ahead to a fantasy championship, riding Dameon Pierce's back, breaking every tackle along the way. Again, this is two pitiful defenses, so I expect points to be flowing right now. The over/under on the ESPN app is saying it's 44. I believe it will go over. Carr is a decent streamer this week, and Josh Jacobs and Davante Adams should be week winners this week. We saw what they did against Kansas City prior to the bye. Obviously, we're still waiting to see what happens with the suspension to Davante Adams, but as long as they're playing, especially against this Houston defense, I think they should be absolute smash plays. Last game we're going to touch in this section will be Steelers at Dolphins. Tua is supposed to be back in a matchup that is allowing the most points to the wide receiver position, with the Steelers' very, very decimated defense. Tyreek is absolutely a smash play, and Waddle should be good, but he has a ton of injury concerns. Still getting back from the groin. Still was carted off with that injury or the shoulder injury at the end of last game. So I'll be paying attention to the injury reports. As of Wednesday, he was a non-participant at practice. So if he's continuing to not participate, then maybe he is a guy that you should be holding out from your starting lineups despite the really good matchup. Again, these injuries are really crushing Waddle season for me. Again, on the other side, Najee, he's a yes. He's so consistent. He's not going to be good. He's not going to win you a week, but he's going to provide you that floor. Not what you want from a first-round pick, but again, someone who will get it done for you. And again, the Dolphins' secondary is still having issues. It's still a little injured. So my wide receiver confidence varies based on which QB starts. If Trubisky starts, I will have more confidence in Deontay Johnson. If Kenny Pickett starts, I will have way more confidence in George Pickens. Just keep an eye out for who actually is a game-time decision and who's going to start for this team, and then that's the wide receiver I would roll with based on that flowchart. So those are the rest of the matchups I want to talk about, and now let's get to our matchup of the week.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready to rumble!
All right, so as we saw from that lovely graphic, matchup of the week is going to be Seahawks at the Chargers, with LA currently favored by 6.5 points. The over-under is 51, the only over-under that's over 50 points this week, leaving Seattle with a projected point total of 22.5, while the Chargers have a projected point total of 28.5. This is the highest over-under of the week. Are you noticing a trend here with our games of the week? Are you noticing a trend just a little bit? We like high-scoring games, more fantasy points for us. And we saw on Monday night with an absolute nightmare of a game. It was absolutely horrific. But again, this is a Broncos defense that is really good. Patrick Surtain is currently one of the best DBs, if not the best performing cornerback in the country at the moment. So I'm not surprised that he completely shut down Mike Williams. That Broncos defense, for as bad as the offense is playing, the defense is playing equally as good, and they might not be in contention for one of the best defenses in the NFL right now. So my faith in this explosive Chargers offense is not shaken despite that Monday night performance. Despite having Tariq Woolen, who is a candidate for Rookie of the Year, and I'm very upset because I really wanted my team to pick Tariq Woolen in the 4th round, in the 3rd round, but he fell to the 5th round to the Seattle Seahawks, and he's obviously really good. But he is Rookie of the Year conversation, but is nowhere close to the ability of Patrick Surtain. Plus, that defense as a whole is nowhere close to the ability of what that Broncos front four can do. So expect the Chargers offense to have a great bounce back game here. Obviously, we saw that Josh Palmer played really, really well against this Broncos defense when he was asked to step up, as Patrick Surtain was shadowing Mike Williams all night. So right now, Keenan Allen is back at practice. He's designated to return from IR, but I still don't think he will play this week. The Chargers have their bye next week, and just given Keenan Allen's that he's already re-aggravated this hamstring injury, I suspect that they will keep him out for this game, keep him out through the bye, have him fully healed up, and bring him back in week 9. So Josh Palmer definitely is a guy that I'm looking forward to in this game. On the other hand, this is going to be a much better test for Kenneth Walker. Despite being a defense that invites the run, giving up the 4th most points of the fantasy running back position, we've talked about in a lot of my guys section how I'm picking running backs that go against the Chargers just because of the way they invite the run and the way that Brandon Staley coaches up this defense. It's still a much stiffer defensive line than what he faced last week against Arizona. Also, we saw a game script against Arizona that got out of hand really, really, really fast. Arizona could do nothing on offense, so it became a heavy run-dominant game script, which obviously favored Kenneth Walker, and obviously played to the detriment of Geno Smith. So I think this is going to be a much more balanced game script. I think in order to keep up with the Chargers offense, that Geno will have to get the ball in his hand and will have to sling it down the field. So I'm very interested to see how Kenneth Walker performs when it's not a run-dominant game script. Despite being a favorable defensive matchup for the run, it's not going to be force-fed to him like it was last week, and I want to see him put up those same points against a slightly better defense before I start buying into the Kenneth Walker hype. So let's go into our must-starts. Geno is a must-start, absolutely. DK Metcalf, Kenneth Walker, Justin Herbert, Mike Williams, Gerald Everett, and Austin Eckler are all guys that I have full confidence that you should be starting this week. In the probably start section, it comes down to Tyler Lockett again last week. I mean, he had a great week 2 weeks ago. Last week, only 2.7 points. Kind of a disappointment there. He's clearly number 2 wide receiver in this offense. So I'm going to, especially against a little bit of an upgrade in the passing defense that is we see in the Chargers, I will put him at a probably start. I'm looking for better options, but he's still pretty high up there as like a secondary option. And this is where we find Josh Palmer, again, a guy that I would definitely be comfortable starting in a flex position should that be required. In the desperation start, DeAndre Carter, man, like he looked really good. If Keenan Allen is out, then DeAndre Carter is definitely a guy that I have full confidence going forward with. And Will Dissly, the tight end of choice for Geno Smith. Again, this is a game that I think it's going to have to really be put in Geno's hand for him to throw the ball around, for him to be competitive, to even keep up with the point scoring on the Chargers side. And Will Dissly is a guy that, you know, we've seen a lot of good throws. Will Dissly has a good connection with Geno Smith. So, I mean, no one knows what the heck to do with tight ends, and he's a good as streamer start, a good stream at tight end as any. So I'd go with this one just because it is the most over/under of any game this week and should be a high-scoring game. So after we wrap up our matchup of the week, let's talk about my guys. After just putting my guy week this past week, we really had to dig deep, and I've gotten some pretty good my guys for you this week. Number one, this is a confidence play, a guy that's returning to this list after having 3 down weeks. It's going to be Drake London, currently projected for 9.6 fantasy points against the Cincinnati Bengals. I think there was a little bit of a lull in the way Marcus Mariota played. They played some really tremendous defenses, but Drake London, I think he's really comfortable. He's running. He's out there for a majority of snaps. He's running a ton of routes. He's getting a massive target share. He has the largest snap share of any rookie through 6 games, and he is top 10 in target share in the NFL currently. So I think that against a slightly easier matchup than Tampa Bay Buccaneers last week, Marcus Mariota has proven himself to be a competent quarterback. He should be finding Drake London, and I think he should be a guy that, despite having a couple down weeks, is back in your lineup this week. Rondale Moore, again, Rondale Moore playing, this is a confidence play just from the fact that, listen, his snap share has increased every single game since he returned in week 4. He's taking over that slot position for Greg Dortch. Hollywood Brown is no longer part of this offense, opening up a ton of opportunity for Rondale Moore. His targets have increased, so week 4 it was 5, then it was 8, and this past week it was 10. And I think that just the way that the Cardinals play, they're really going to look for him to be targeted over the middle of the field in that slot position. I suspect a lot of that secondary and safety focus is going to be on DeAndre Hopkins, with him being back in the offense for the first time this year, opening up Rondale Moore to a really big game. If they want to be competitive, they have to feed Rondale the ball. That's why I'm going with Rondale Moore as a flex play. My guy for the week is going to be Brandon Ayuk, a guy that had kind of a really slow start to the season, and I know he was even dropped in some fantasy leagues, but again, this is a Kansas City defense that is allowing the 5th most points to wide receivers. They are bottom 5 in position adjusted rank against the wide receiver position, and we saw how good Brandon Ayuk was last week, so I'm just going to ride that hot hand and continue to start Brandon Ayuk. Again, James Robinson, I know this is not an ideal matchup for James Robinson, and he has had a couple disappointing weeks. It seems like that injury is a little bit hampering him. He doesn't have any of that explosiveness that he's had. Again, it was a really quick recovery from the Achilles, but this is a Giants team that let Kenyon Drake run for over 100 yards on them, and if Kenyon Drake can run for over 100 yards, then I have confidence that the Jaguars should be able to keep up with them, should be able to incorporate both running backs in the passing game, and obviously with Christian Kirk being their best wide receiver and not being a great weapon really from the wide receiver standpoint, they do have to run their offense primarily through the ground game. I know it's a 5-1 Giants team that has had a really good defensive line, and Kayvon Thibodeau is playing really well for a rookie, but my confidence play is to go back to James Robinson after a few down weeks. Lastly, my streaming quarterback for the week. This is going to be a really hot take. It's going to be Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones has actually performed really, really well this year. Hasn't had a single game below 12 points. I know it's a very low barrier, but we've seen a lot of quarterbacks struggle and not even break that double-digit mark. He's not failed to reach double digits in a single game. His rushing upside truly helps carry him. 3 weeks ago in week 4, he had a game of 23 fantasy points with 0 touchdowns. So his rushing ability, he has sneaky rushing upside, especially against this Jags defense that is pretty putrid and bottom 5 in the league. I expect him to throw. I expect him to run. I expect him to get a tremendous amount of fantasy points, especially when you have guys like Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts on bye, maybe even a Kirk Cousins on bye. He is a guy that I'm definitely going to consider as a worthy flex start and someone that should put up a decent fantasy game in the absence of a better option. So those are my 5 guys for the week. Let's recap. It's going to be Drake London, Rondale Moore, Brandon Ayuk, James Robinson, and Daniel Jones. So look forward to those. Hopefully they can perform a little bit better than my guys last week. And now we'll leave you out with week 7 with our parting thoughts here.
You know, there's only one thing that I'm not clear about.
Actually, there is one thing.
One other thing.
All right, so my parting thought for the week is a very simple message. Don't give up. We're not even halfway through this season. I know it's been a struggle. I know we've had a lot of low-scoring games. We've had a lot of frustrating players that haven't worked out. A lot of people are sitting at 2-4, 3-3, and thinking their season might be over. But all it takes is one good run. All you need to do is get one spot in the playoffs. And as we've seen so far this season, there's been a ton of waiver guys that come in and come in to help spoil a game against an opponent. Deion Jackson came in, scored 23 points, led a lot of people to week wins from pulling him off the waiver wire. So stay on top of your team, actively manage your team, and you still have a chance, even if you're sitting at like a 1-5 or 0-6. As long as you get into the playoffs, you have a shot, especially when it comes down to those late season games when injuries start to rack up. So again, don't give up. Actively manage your team, continue to follow advice, whether it's from myself, whether it's for other people, and good luck to the rest of the season.